I will admit this is not the best look for me. All right. Yes, I'm in my pajamas. And yes, this is a Christmas hat, but it's early and I'm trying to get this recorded before I go out today with my wife. We have like a whole day planned of the two of us traveling around the area, and none of it's gaming related. So there's no point in vlogging any of that yet, especially since I don't have the right rigs really to do vlogging on the go. At least I don't yet, but I will soon. But I wanted to make sure I got a video out today because I'm doing this daily. And I wanted to make sure I covered an important topic for me, which is campaign journals. So on Saturdays, we're going to discuss on Living for Crits some of the things that I do, I think make me a better game master. And one of those things that I feel differentiate my games from other games, not that mine are better, but just what's different for me, is I love to keep records. I love to keep journals of what my players have done at the table. And I do this in a variety of ways. It started out years ago of being on an old GeoCities account back in the late 90s. I would just do short paragraphs of what occurred in my second edition Dark Sun game or my Alternity game, just to have an idea of the progression of the campaign. I also used to keep a campaign crematorium, which is where all the dead characters went. And it was a badge of honor if your character was killed. Although a lot of my players didn't feel that way. I felt that way. I think it gave me for a while, it gave me a bad rap as being a character killer, which wasn't untrue. But those days have sort of changed right now, especially since I have been playing a lot of games recently that require a more in-depth character design, like Fantasy Age, Shadow the Demon Lord, and now moving into 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Although during my DCC days, I did kill off a lot of characters, I gotta say. But today we're going to talk about a campaign journal for my Shadow the Demon Lord campaign that I'm running. And I'm running the Tales of the Demon Lord adventure path for my friends. So this is a great little campaign. We meet every few weeks on Saturday afternoons online, although our first in-person game with us is actually next week. We're pretty excited for that. We meet online usually and we play for just a couple hours. Shadow of the Demon Lord is a fantastic game for trying to complete really great story arcs in limited, more adult frames of adult time frames, right? For grown-ups, we have work, we have kids, we have all this stuff. Our friends Cody and Shannon have a newborn baby. You know, they have all that going on. So how do you get some time gaming? And Demon Lord is a great way of just kind of letting you have a full campaign from 0 to 10th level over 10 or 20 sessions. We're doing it in 20 sessions, 22-hour sessions. And it's working great for us. But at the core of this is our campaign journal. And I'm going to show that off. So 1 second here as I share my screen. So I thought for today, I'm going to take you through what I put together for a campaign journal. I keep saying character journal, but characters are important in it, right? Characters are centerpiece here. So my campaign journals, my campaign notes, these are documents I keep on Google or Google Doc. And I always make sure that I have them shared so my friends can go in and they can edit them as well. And they can make notes to them. Not that they all do. I did catch one today. I guess my friend Cody had gone in here and he had his ancestry listed as awesome for Guar Stinkfist. I did change that to orc. Maybe I'll change it back and put awesome in there just so it's there. But I always start these out with the PCs. Who are the player characters in our game? And I like to include as many details that are necessary for me as the game master. Now, granted, early in the campaign, this is more important for me than later. I get to know these characters as I live with them over the course of 10, 20 sessions. But in these early days, it's great to note, what's the ancestry of the character, what is their class. It's paths in Demon Lord. It would be class in Dungeons and Dragons or Dungeon Crawl Classics. It would be, what's it called? Your type, your descriptor type and focus in Cypher System. But here it's paths, so I include that. So Dr. Gwyneth Luxor, my wife's character, is a human magician and wizard who came from more money and went to university. An academic historian and doctor and likes spelunking. So interesting character there. Each character's details are here. Some are more important than others. Demonica Bolton, my friend Shannon's clockwork magician, artificer, started out her life as a human that was sort of transformed Full Metal Alchemist style into a small suit of armor, and her soul trapped inside the machine created for her son's soul because her son was murdered. That's great backstory information that I could use in future campaigning. So it's great to have those details here. Some campaigns, like a campaign I ran for Demon Lord last year, have way more information in here, especially if you give the players the ability to edit it, and those players like to write. 3 of my 4 players in that campaign were professional writers or editors in the game industry, and they threw so much cool information in here. It was great. I love that document also. It's a bit more messy, so this is more organized. We're going to show this one today. The next thing, and I've done a crap job with this, is important NPCs. I promise more of my docs have important NPCs. My other Demon Lord one, they're all dead. It actually notes that they're dead. But as your campaign progresses, it can be really helpful to just note who are the players, the movers and the shakers in the world that mean something to the characters. The mayor of Crossings, the town, the city that our campaign takes place in, is great, but Sergeant Elise is a much more important character. So Sergeant Elise is listed as an important NPC. I probably could list more right now, but I haven't because I'm a bad GM, and sometimes I rely more on what goes into the play session details below. I love giving my players what my source of inspiration was as I was reading and designing and working on the campaign. Even if it's a campaign where it's a published module or series of modules, I want to show the players where we're going in our own mind space. It's easy to say, oh, it's grimdark horror fantasy. But, if you say, well, it feels a lot like The Witcher or the Diablo series with a dash of Rat Queens, an awesome comic book series you should check out, and a bit of Labyrinth, that invokes more feeling, I think, for what the campaign should be. I hope that some of this inspired some of the characters above. I would love to know that, Demonica the Clockwork was somewhat inspired by, mentioning Labyrinth. But even if it doesn't, it gives the players who may not have spent the time to read through all of the Demon Lord core book, it gives them an idea of where we're going, and I think it's just a great piece in there to have. All right, the nuts and bolts are in the play sessions. I always include the session name, the session date. If there is a calendar system in your game, use it. So, for instance, the Lankmar DCC Lankmar has a calendar system. Talos has a calendar system. So we'll get to Talos in a second here, but I love to include that specific calendar system. It just gives the players more reason to look forward into the campaign and maybe look backward at things that have occurred and things that are going to happen in the world. It helps make a more living world. So session notes, this is really important. This is all of the nuts and bolts, the little details of things that happen in your game. This does not take long to write. I used to write 800-900 word blog posts, essentially, of my campaigns that had occurred. And I used to write more than that when I was younger and had more time. I don't need to do that anymore. All of these documents are really for is to remind you of what occurred in the game. So every 10 minutes in game, take 20 or 30 seconds to put some notes in here. So I know that the campaign started in Crossings. The characters were sleeping in the same tenement floor. They were approached by Sergeant Elise to meet at the Smoking Shells Tavern near the Stream of Tears. That they, while eating clams, snails, and drinking beer, they were all just kind of hanging out down there. They got some, they got a story of a missing Father Gregory, and they went and investigated a shrine, and they dealt with some halfling thugs. That's all here. This did not take long to write. However, now that I'm 7 sessions into this campaign, I might remember things that happened early on. So it's really helpful to go back and say, okay, what happened that first game? This is what happened. I let the player characters edit this too. They don't always do that. Your mileage may vary. I also love including quotes. If one of my players says something funny in the game, I include it. If one of the player characters says something in the game, I include it with that person's name. So Evie said this, but I know that Bex, Evie's character, said this, which some of this stuff is, I guess, you had to be there, to get the humor in it. But since we were there, we do. I skipped over the part about, the PCs. You do want to list what PCs were in your games for a couple of reasons. If you're running Dungeon Crawl Classics or a game that uses character trees like the old AD&D second edition Dark Sun, you may have different PCs at each game. If you're running an open table, like I used to run at the game stores, you might want to include something where, if you have different players show up, you have their characters in the game. But you might also notice in this small campaign of 4 players that there's a Bex here, but later on there's a Dorrit. Well, that's because Judge Evie's character Bex died and is now in the Book of the Dead. You want to celebrate the dead characters in your games, people, so put them somewhere special. At the end of your campaign journal, maybe you can list how they died. But, for me, just throwing them in there, you get to remember that they were important parts of the campaign. And that's it. That's a real simple campaign journal. Not a lot of work, pretty easy. I have one started for Talis, but I'm kind of cheating here, and I feel dirty about this. So for Talis, since I'm using D&D Beyond for the very first time, I have the campaign link. I'm not going to share it, but it's there to the campaign, and no important NPCs yet. And I just have a screen cap of what they're playing. So Maitri hasn't finished her character yet, but Shannon and Paul and Andy and Michael have. So I have their characters listed here. I just took I can go into their character records through D&D Beyond. I'm not sure how I feel about this yet. I'm used to keeping everything on my side, but we'll see how this goes. No NPCs yet, not to mention. And then finally, I'm having a challenge with suggested viewing for reading and for themes and tone for Talis. All I have right now is Torchlight. So I think it feels a lot like Torchlight to me, the video game series. But if you have suggestions, throw them in the comments. I'd love to see them. I have a screen grab here of the Talis calendar. So this will be very helpful for the players. We're starting this game on Bright Father's Day, the 14th of Blessing. Look at that, which is, I believe, August, essentially, right? So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. Yep. First game takes place on 14th of Blessing, Bright Father's Day. And that's next week. Well, it's not August next week, but next week is the first game of this campaign. So I'll have more material here, maybe to share in the future. And that's it. That's campaign journals. And that's really easy, right? We can all do this and make it a part of our game. So I hope you do too. I hope this was helpful to show how I do this. And if you have a way of how you keep track of your campaigns, whether it's through journaling or through old composition books, whatever, put those in the comments below too. Let's have a discussion about that. I've been loving the discussions we've been having in the comments section. So those really make my day to have these open dialogues. So please throw them in there. Tomorrow, we're traveling tomorrow too. I will be doing Shelfie Sunday, and I'm dipping back into the early 90s, the shelves of Walden books. And tomorrow we'll be discussing an option of either the Complete Book of Elves, or the Complete Book of Gnomes and Halflings, or the Complete Book of Dwarves. In my mind, the best of the three, my favorite of the three, falling apart too. Look at that. That's a shame. And, oh, I almost went down. And the most notorious of the three, but also really pretty cool. So go to Twitter right now, at I Live for Crits. There's some voting on. Well, if you're watching this and it's Saturday, July 24th, yeah, go to Twitter right now and you can go vote on it. If it's after that, then you just get to watch whatever's next in the sequence of videos. So I'm sorry, but that's what's going to happen. So that's it. All right. Thank you so much. I will see you all tomorrow, and play nice.